His wife left him for being poor. She said he was a nobody, a man unworthy of her name. Months later, she sent him a golden invitation to her wedding with another man. She expected him to show up broken, humiliated, begging for crumbs of her attention. But when David Cole walked into that wedding hall, what he did made every guest rise to their feet in shock and left the bride trembling in her gown. This is the story of betrayal, arrogance, and the most unforgettable revenge ever witnessed. The lawyer's office was silent except for the steady hum of the air conditioner. David Cole sat across the mahogany table, his hands resting flat on a stack of divorce papers. His eyes were calm, almost too calm. But the stillness in them carried years of swallowed pain. Melissa sat opposite, perfectly groomed in a fitted dress that sparkled under the fluorescent light, her face glowing with the satisfaction of triumph. "Sign the papers, David," she said coldly, tapping a manicured nail against the file. "I won't keep living like this. You bring me nothing but embarrassment." Her words were deliberate, each one meant to cut. David's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He lowered his gaze to the papers, scanned the fine print one last time, and then pressed his pen against the page. The ink bled like a wound as he signed away their marriage. Melissa leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs as if she were watching a performance. "Finally," she said, "freedom." The lawyer cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the chill in the room. "Mr. Cole, you retain no property under these terms. Your wife, ex-wife," Melissa corrected sharply, "your ex-wife keeps the apartment, the savings, the furniture. You are entitled to nothing." David's hand stilled, his lips curled, not in bitterness, but in the faintest of smiles. Melissa noticed it and frowned, confused by his reaction. Then, as if savoring the perfect finale, she reached into her handbag and slid another envelope across the table. It was cream-colored with a gold crest and sealed with wax. "Consider this a gift," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "My wedding invitation. I want you to see how a real man treats me. The ceremony will be unforgettable." David's eyes flickered, but he gave nothing away. He picked up the envelope, studied the elegant seal, and slipped it into the pocket of his jacket. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Melissa smirked. "You should be grateful, David. I could have left you without even saying goodbye, but I want you to witness what you'll never be. A man worthy of me." The lawyer's pen clattered to the desk. "Why would you attend that wedding?" he asked softly once Melissa left the room in her designer heels, perfume lingering like poison in the air. David stood, straightening his worn but clean jacket, his posture suddenly taller. He didn't look at the lawyer. His gaze was fixed on the wide office window, where the city skyline glimmered with ambition and possibility. "Because," he said, his voice low and steady, "this time she'll see me." He touched his jacket pocket, not just to feel the invitation, but the folded blueprint hidden beneath it, a design he had once shown Melissa, who had laughed in his face, a design that had since attracted the interest of powerful men she didn't even know existed. And as he stepped out of the office into the bustling street, the faint echo of his late mother's voice trailed him like a whisper on the wind. "One day, the world will see your worth." The cafe was crowded that Saturday afternoon, filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the smell of fresh pastries. David sat at a corner table, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold. He had arrived early, hopeful. Melissa had insisted they meet, saying she had something important to discuss. He thought maybe it was about working things out, maybe even a small chance at reconciliation. When the bell above the cafe door chimed, Melissa walked in, not alone. Her arm was looped through that of a tall man in an expensive suit. His Rolex glimmered under the warm cafe lights. His smile practiced, the kind of confidence that money seemed to breed. Melissa saw David immediately but didn't flinch. Instead, she paraded across the room like a queen entering court, drawing eyes to herself. "David," she said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear, "this is Raymond, my future." The words stung, but David forced himself to rise, extending his hand politely toward the stranger. Raymond shook it briefly, more out of courtesy than respect. Melissa, on the other hand, leaned against Raymond's shoulder, her eyes locked on David with cruel amusement. "You've been working on those silly designs of yours for years," she said, her voice like a whip. "Sketches don't pay bills, David. Dreams don't buy me diamonds. Look at him," she gestured to Raymond. "This is a man who knows how to take care of a woman. A man of means, not scraps." Conversations around them faltered as heads turned, whispers buzzing in the background. David's ears burned, but he held her gaze, refusing to look down. He could feel the humiliation pressing in from every corner of the cafe, strangers smirking at his expense. "You didn't have to do this in public," he said quietly, his voice steady, though inside his chest thundered. Melissa laughed, tipping her head back. "Public? Oh, David, I want everyone to see. I want them to know I made the right choice leaving you. You're nothing but a poor man with empty promises. I deserve better, and now I have it." Raymond slid a possessive arm around her waist, nodding. "She's right. Some men are dreamers, others are doers. Melissa chose wisely." David inhaled slowly, letting the words sink deep like knives. He didn't argue, didn't plead. Instead, he set down his untouched coffee, picked up his worn leather notebook from the table, and tucked it into his jacket. As he passed Melissa, she smirked. "Try not to embarrass yourself anymore, David. Not everyone has the stomach to watch a man fail this badly." He paused just long enough to look her in the eyes. "Failure isn't falling," he said softly. "It's staying down." Melissa's smile faltered for a split second, though she masked it quickly with a scoff. David walked out, the doorbell jingling behind him, the sound almost like a declaration of war. Outside, the air was sharp and cold. He clutched the notebook tighter against his chest. Inside those pages weren't just sketches. There were blueprints for something no one at that cafe could yet imagine. And one day, he promised himself, Melissa would understand exactly what she had thrown away. The apartment was small, barely more than 4 walls and a flickering light bulb dangling from the ceiling. David's mattress sat on the floor. A stack of books propped against the wall beside it, and a folding table held his most valuable possession, his notebooks filled with diagrams, equations, and dreams. At night, while the city outside pulsed with laughter and neon lights, David's world shrank to the scratch of pencil on paper and the hum of his tired laptop. He worked alone, night after night, on designs no one believed in. Energy grids, sustainable engines, systems that could power cities without draining the earth dry. His eyes burned from lack of sleep, but his mind raced with possibilities. Sometimes hunger gnawed at him. Sometimes the landlord banged on the door for late rent, but he refused to stop. His late mother's words whispered in his mind every time despair tried to crush him. "One day, the world will see your worth." The betrayal at the cafe became fuel. Every laugh, every cruel word Melissa had hurled at him, replayed in his memory until they became sparks that kept his fire alive. He remembered the way she had leaned on Raymond's shoulder, smirking at him in front of strangers, the way she had said, "You're nothing." That sentence echoed louder than the ticking clock on his wall. Still, progress was slow. Rejection emails filled his inbox, investors who called him too idealistic, companies that dismissed him as a dreamer with no track record. Nights blurred into mornings. His hands grew calloused, not just from writing, but from working odd jobs to scrape together money for parts. He fixed air conditioners, washed cars, even hauled boxes in warehouses. Whatever it took to buy one more component, one more tool to keep building. One particularly cold night, after 12 hours of work at a loading dock, David returned to his apartment, clothes damp from rain, and powered up his laptop. The screen flickered before stabilizing, illuminating his tired face. He stared at the model spinning on the screen, a compact generator that could run indefinitely on clean energy. He whispered to himself, "If this works, nothing else matters." But his hope was fragile, tested daily. Until one morning an email subject line froze him in his tracks. "Request for meeting, Cole Innovations." He clicked it, hardly breathing. A firm he'd once approached, the kind of people who had laughed him out of the room, wanted to meet again. They had reviewed his latest submission and found it promising. His hands shook as he read the message again and again, making sure it was real. For the first time in years, a genuine smile broke across his face, the kind of smile that comes not from luck, but from the grind finally paying off. As he leaned back in his chair, the worn ceiling above him looked different, not like the roof of a crumbling apartment, but like a canvas waiting for a new beginning. The echo of Melissa's words, "You'll never be more than scraps," still lingered in his memory. "But now," he whispered back, almost to himself, "watch me." The lobby was all marble floors and polished chrome, the kind of place that made ordinary men shrink. David stood at the reception desk in his best jacket, clean, pressed, but years out of fashion. The receptionist barely glanced up when he gave his name. "Take a seat, Mr. Cole. Someone will be with you shortly." He sat near the glass wall, watching the city traffic far below, his reflection faint against the towering skyscrapers. His notebook rested in his lap, its pages smudged with pencil marks and calculations. This wasn't just paper, it was his entire life condensed into diagrams and numbers. When his name was finally called, he followed a young assistant into a boardroom lined with executives, men in tailored suits, women with sharp eyes. At the head of the table sat Victor Sterling, a silver-haired investor known for building and breaking fortunes with a single decision. His presence filled the room. "Mr. Cole," Victor said, steepling his fingers, "you've asked for this meeting before. My staff tells me you've improved your designs. Why should we listen now?" David laid his notebook gently on the table, flipping to the newest set of schematics. His voice was steady, though his palms were damp. "Because what I've built can change the future of energy. It's compact, affordable, and clean. It can power a home indefinitely without fuel or waste. And it's not a dream anymore. It's tested." The board leaned in, skeptical yet curious. One executive smirked. "Tested? By whom? Yourself? In that rundown apartment you live in?" Laughter rippled across the table, but Victor raised a hand, silencing them, his eyes fixed on David, sharp as steel. "Show us." David reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small, box-shaped prototype. It looked simple, almost unimpressive, but when he connected it to a lamp on the conference table, the bulb glowed bright. Then he disconnected it entirely from any visible source of power. The lamp remained lit. A hush fell over the room. "This device," David continued, his voice stronger now, "runs indefinitely without external input. No fuel, no grid connection. It's efficient, scalable, and cheaper than anything on the market. Imagine entire communities lit up without dependency on failing systems. Imagine freedom from rising bills." The silence stretched, heavy. Finally, Victor leaned forward. "How much are you asking for?" David met his eyes. "Not charity, partnership. You get 20% equity. I retain control. And together we take this global." The executives exchanged shocked glances. One whispered, "He's crazy." Another said, "This is unproven." But Victor Sterling didn't laugh. He studied David like a man appraising a hidden diamond. Then he smiled faintly. "You remind me of myself 30 years ago. Everyone thought I was insane too." He turned to his team. "Draft the contract. I want in." David's chest tightened, relief and disbelief colliding inside him. For the first time, someone wasn't dismissing him. Someone powerful believed. As he shook Victor's hand, the memory of Melissa's mocking face flashed in his mind. Her voice echoed, "Sketches don't pay bills, David." Now standing in that boardroom, he whispered under his breath so only he could hear, "But they will." The weeks that followed were a blur of signatures, late-night phone calls, and endless travel. David found himself in places he had once only dreamed of, labs with walls of glass, factories humming with machinery, conference halls where his name appeared on glowing screens. Investors who once dismissed him now leaned in to listen. Engineers called him Sir. Journalists scribbled his every word. His prototype had become a sensation in the private circle of industry insiders. Victor Sterling's endorsement was more than money. It was legitimacy. Doors that had been locked tight now swung open. David worked tirelessly, never forgetting the years of hunger and ridicule that had brought him here. Every detail mattered. Every calculation had to be perfect. Failure was no longer an option. Meanwhile, Melissa lived her life like a carefully staged play. Photos of her and Raymond flooded social media. Trips to Paris, dinners at rooftop restaurants, shopping bags swinging from her arms as she paraded down designer boulevards. She laughed in every picture, her diamond ring glinting like proof that she had chosen well. To her friends, she boasted endlessly. "David was dragging me down," she would say with a dramatic sigh over glasses of champagne. "I had to escape before he ruined me completely. Look at me now. Look at Raymond. This is what it means to be with a real man." Raymond smiled in public, the image of success, but behind closed doors he was different. He lived on appearances, always calculating how to maintain the facade of wealth and power. His businesses were risky, built on credit and borrowed prestige, but Melissa didn't see it, or refused to. She only saw the expensive cars, the glittering parties, and the attention. One evening, as Melissa scrolled through her phone at a dinner party, a headline caught her eye. "Unknown innovator signs historic deal with Sterling Enterprises." The article featured a blurred photo of David shaking Victor's hand. For a split second, her smile faltered. "Who's that?" a friend asked, peering over her shoulder. "No one," Melissa said quickly, flipping the screen away. "Just some tech nonsense." But the name haunted her. David Cole. She dismissed it with a laugh, telling herself it was coincidence that he would never climb that high. Still, a seed of unease was planted. David, on the other hand, was too busy to even think of Melissa. Nights blurred into mornings at Sterling's offices. Engineers marveled at his brilliance. Partners praised his vision. He poured himself into every blueprint, every test run. The memory of Melissa's mockery lingered, yes, but now it was fuel. Late one night, standing on the balcony of his new high-rise apartment, he looked out over the city that had once ignored him. Neon lights stretched in every direction, but for the first time he wasn't on the outside looking in. He was part of it now, shaping it. And though he didn't know it yet, fate was already setting the stage. For while Melissa flaunted her life with Raymond, invitations were being written, plans were being made, and soon the paths they had chosen would collide again in the most public way possible. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers as Melissa swept through in a crimson gown, her arm hooked tightly around Raymond's. Cameras flashed. Guests turned heads. She soaked it all in, convinced this was the life she had fought for. Raymond raised his glass and smiled for the crowd, his charm polished to perfection. But behind the champagne toasts and stage photographs, shadows loomed. Raymond's deals were stretched thin, propped up by loans and favors. Suppliers whispered of unpaid invoices. His office staff murmured about late salaries. Yet in public, he masked it with tailored suits and leased luxury cars. Melissa never asked questions. She preferred the illusion. One evening, after another gala dinner, Melissa noticed a change. Raymond was quieter, pacing their penthouse with his phone glued to his ear. She approached him, silk robe flowing, irritation in her voice. "What's going on, Raymond? You've been distracted all week." "Nothing," he said sharply, then softened with a smile. "Just business. Big deals coming through. Don't worry." But his eyes betrayed him, and when he thought she wasn't looking, he poured himself a second glass of whiskey and stared at the skyline as if it might collapse on him. Meanwhile, across the city, David was thriving. His device had moved from prototype to production. Small-scale units powered schools in struggling neighborhoods. Families lit their homes with his invention, their gratitude spilling into letters and videos that Victor showed proudly at board meetings. News outlets began to notice. The genius no one believed in, one headline read, "From nothing to revolution." David's name was no longer whispered. It was spoken with awe. Investors flocked, governments called, but David stayed grounded. He worked long hours, sleeves rolled up, sitting shoulder to shoulder with his engineers. Success hadn't softened him, it had sharpened him. Every milestone carried the memory of Melissa's laughter in that cafe, the sting of being called nothing. That memory kept him relentless. One night, Melissa and her friends gathered for drinks, her laughter echoing across the terrace. One of them scrolled through her phone and frowned. "Melissa, "Isn't this your ex-husband?" she asked, showing a news clip of David unveiling his technology at a press conference. Cameras captured him in a sharp suit, his voice steady, his presence commanding. Melissa froze for half a second, then laughed too loudly. "Oh, please. He's probably just riding on someone else's coattails. David never had the drive to succeed." Her friends exchanged skeptical looks. The video continued playing in the background, David's face illuminated by stage lights as reporters shouted questions. But when she went home that night, alone in the vast penthouse, she watched the clip again and again. She studied the way he spoke with confidence, the way people leaned in to hear him. A faint unease gnawed at her chest. Raymond walked in, still on his phone, his expression stormy. He barked something about delays and creditors. Melissa quickly shut the video off, hiding the screen. "Who were you watching?" he asked, suspicious. "No one," she snapped. "Just nonsense." But deep down, for the first time, Melissa felt something she hadn't expected to feel about David Cole. Fear. The auditorium was packed, the kind of event broadcast across networks and streamed worldwide. Governments, industry leaders, and journalists filled the seats, buzzing with anticipation. At the center of the stage stood David Cole, once a man dismissed as a dreamer, now the keynote speaker at an international energy summit. He adjusted the microphone, his tailored suit fitting him like armor. Behind him, a massive screen displayed his creation, a sleek, refined version of the generator he had once built alone in a dim apartment. "Years ago," David began, his voice firm, "I was told my ideas were impossible. I was told dreams couldn't power homes or change lives. But today I stand before you with proof that innovation doesn't belong only to the privileged. It belongs to those who refuse to give up." The crowd erupted in applause, cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes furiously. David demonstrated the new model, showing how it could power an entire block with no external grid. A hush fell over the room as the lights flickered, then surged back on, powered solely by his machine. The standing ovation was thunderous. By the time the summit ended, headlines around the world carried his name. David Cole, the visionary who defied poverty. Governments lined up to negotiate contracts. Investors flooded Sterling Enterprises with calls. David had become more than an innovator. He was a global force. Meanwhile, Melissa sat in her penthouse, phone buzzing with notifications. Every news channel, every social feed seemed to echo the same name, David Cole. Her wine glass trembled in her hand as she flipped through article after article, her heart pounding with disbelief. "How?" she whispered to herself, pacing the room. The man she had mocked, humiliated, abandoned. He was supposed to stay broken. He was supposed to disappear. Instead, he was everywhere. Raymond stormed in from his office, phone pressed to his ear. His voice was sharp, angry. "I told you, the numbers don't add up. We're stretched too thin. Push the payments another month." He slammed the phone down, loosening his tie with frustration. Melissa seized the moment. "Raymond, have you seen the news? It's David. He's making headlines. International contracts. Do you understand what that means?" Raymond's jaw tightened. "It means nothing to us. Let him play scientist. I don't care." But Melissa saw the flicker of worry in his eyes, and for the first time, a dangerous thought took root in her mind. What if she had left too soon? What if the man she discarded had become the man she was always chasing? That night, while Raymond argued with creditors on the phone, Melissa sat at her vanity, staring into the mirror. Her reflection mocked her. She had always prided herself on choosing winners, on climbing higher. But David's success made her look foolish. She pulled out the golden wedding invitation she had ordered just days before. Her own marriage to Raymond was scheduled for the end of the month. She had planned to make it the grandest affair, a spectacle of wealth and power. But now, as she traced her finger over the embossed edges, a new idea whispered to her. What if David was there? What if she invited him, made him watch her flaunt her life one last time? She smiled, the thought sharpening like a blade. Yes, that would put him in his place. She picked up her pen and wrote his name on one of the envelopes. David Cole. The ink glistened under the light, sealing her mistake. The morning sun filtered through the tall glass windows of David's new office. The room was minimalist, sleek. White walls, chrome fixtures, a vast desk overlooking the heartbeat of the city below. Yet among the polished surfaces and glowing monitors, one object stood out. A battered leather notebook, edges frayed, pages yellowed from years of use. He kept it close, a reminder of where it all began. His assistant entered with a stack of mail, carefully arranged. "These need your attention, Mr. Cole. Contracts, proposals, a few personal letters." She placed them neatly before him, but one envelope caught his eye immediately. Cream-colored, gold-trimmed, sealed with wax. He picked it up slowly, his thumb brushing over the embossed crest. The handwriting was unmistakable. Melissa's. For a moment, the world seemed to still. He slid a finger under the seal, broke it, and unfolded the thick card inside. The words shimmered in elegant script. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Melissa Hart and Raymond Blake." David leaned back in his chair, staring at the page. His face betrayed nothing. No anger, no sorrow, only a calm stillness that was almost eerie. The assistant lingered, curious. "Shall I discard it?" David shook his head. "No, leave it." When she left the room, he placed the invitation flat on the desk beside his old notebook. For a long while, he said nothing, only studying the names on the card. Melissa's arrogance was as sharp as ever. She wanted him to see her triumph. She wanted him humiliated, just as she had humiliated him in that cafe, in that lawyer's office. In every place she had declared him a failure. But David was no longer the man she had known. He stood, walked to the window, and looked down at the city he now had a hand in powering. Factories hummed with his machines. Lights glowed because of his designs. Families lived better lives because he refused to stay broken. The faintest smile tugged at his lips, not the smile of a wounded man, but of someone who understood the weight of what was coming. That night, alone in his penthouse, he placed the invitation on the counter and poured himself a glass of water. He didn't need alcohol. His clarity was sharp enough. As he read the card again, memories flooded him. Melissa laughing on Raymond's arm, Melissa sneering at his old shoes, Melissa declaring he would never be anything. He whispered into the empty room, his voice steady. "You wanted me to see you, Melissa." "Fine. You'll see me." He tucked the invitation into the battered leather notebook, closing the pages over it like sealing a pact. Outside, the city lights shimmered, but David's reflection in the glass looked different now. Harder, stronger, untouchable. The countdown had begun. The Grand Hotel ballroom glittered with opulence. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in golden light. Floral arrangements rose like towers on each table, and a string quartet played softly in the background. Guests in gowns and tuxedos mingled, their voices a chorus of wealth and privilege. At the center of it all was Melissa, radiant in a gown that shimmered with hand-sewn jewels. She floated among her guests like royalty, her laughter carrying above the music. On her arm, Raymond played the part of a conquering king, sharp tuxedo, practiced smile, a glass of champagne always in hand. "This is what I deserve," Melissa whispered to him as they posed for another round of photographs. "This is the life David could never give me." Raymond smirked, though a flicker of tension lingered in his eyes. His phone buzzed in his pocket, vibrating with messages he dared not read. He drowned it with another sip of champagne, forcing the facade of confidence to hold. Guests whispered about the extravagance of the ceremony. "No expense spared," one woman said. Melissa truly found herself a man of means. Melissa overheard and smiled, her pride swelling. She lived for moments like these. She had orchestrated every detail to prove her choice was the right one. But as she glanced around the room, her eyes flicked toward the entrance. A small thrill ran through her. Would David actually come? The thought of him standing there, watching her glory, sent shivers of satisfaction through her veins. She wanted him to see every diamond, every chandelier, every whispered compliment about her beauty. The ceremony began, vows exchanged beneath a towering arch of roses. Raymond's words were smooth, practiced, while Melissa's voice dripped with triumph. "With you," she said loudly, eyes shining as though the words were knives aimed at someone not present. I finally have everything I deserve. Guests applauded warmly, the priest blessed their union, and the music swelled. But Melissa's anticipation wasn't for the kiss or the applause. It was for the moment the doors would open. And then it happened. The grand double doors at the back of the ballroom creaked open. Heads turned. Conversations fell into hushed silence. Melissa's smile widened as her eyes locked onto the figure stepping inside. David Cole. He wore a tailored black suit that seemed to sharpen his presence. His posture straight, his gaze steady. The years of weariness were gone, replaced with a quiet authority that made even the wealthiest guests straighten in their seats. He walked slowly, unhurried, as if he owned every step. Whispers rippled through the room. Isn't that Melissa's ex-husband? He looks different. That's David Cole, the man from the Energy Summit. Melissa's heart skipped, though she masked it with a smirk. She leaned close to Raymond. Don't worry, she whispered. He's just here to see what he lost. Raymond forced a grin, but his hand clenched tighter around his glass. David's eyes never left Melissa's. He didn't glance at the chandeliers, the flowers, or the guests. He simply walked forward, a faint smile at the corner of his lips. The kind of smile that unsettles because it holds a secret no one else knows. Melissa straightened her gown, convinced the victory was still hers. She had invited him to watch her triumph. But David's calm gaze told another story, one no one in that room was ready for. The reception was in full swing, the ballroom pulsing with music and laughter. Champagne flowed, waiters glided between tables carrying trays of delicacies, and the newlyweds basked in their audience's admiration. Melissa, flushed with pride and wine, clutched Raymond's arm as they moved from group to group, but her eyes kept straying toward David. He had chosen a seat near the back, perfectly visible yet unassuming. He didn't laugh with the crowd or force conversation. He sat quietly sipping water, observing. And that unsettled her. She couldn't let the moment pass. This was her stage, her triumph. He needed to be reminded of what he had lost. She tugged Raymond toward the dais, grabbed a microphone from the band singer, and tapped it until the crowd quieted. Ladies and gentlemen, Melissa announced, her voice gleaming with confidence, thank you for celebrating with us tonight. As you know, I've finally found the life I deserve, a life of love, success, and true partnership. She beamed at Raymond, who raised his glass dutifully. But tonight, she continued, her eyes flicking deliberately toward the back of the room, we have a very special guest, someone from my past who, despite his circumstances, I was gracious enough to invite. The crowd turned to look at David. Murmurs rippled. Melissa's smile sharpened. Yes, she said, her tone mock sweet. That's my ex-husband, David. He taught me many lessons, chiefly that a woman should never settle for less than she's worth. But look at me now. She spread her arms wide to display the glittering ballroom, the towering floral arrangements, the cameras flashing. I chose better. I rose higher, and I stand here today living the dream every woman deserves. Guests laughed uneasily. Some whispered, uncomfortable with her cruelty. But Melissa thrived on it. She wanted David broken, humiliated, a relic sitting quietly while she shone. David stood. His movement was unhurried, but it drew every eye. He placed his glass down gently, buttoned his jacket, and walked toward the front. Melissa smirked, handing him the microphone as if daring him to speak. By all means, she purred. Say something, David. Share your wisdom. The room hushed. David took the microphone, his gaze steady, voice calm but resonant. Thank you, Melissa, for the invitation, he said. I won't take much of your guest time. I just want to say this. Sometimes what looks like the end of a story is only the beginning. And sometimes, he paused, letting the silence stretch, those we underestimate the most have the most to show us. A faint murmur spread across the room. Melissa forced a laugh, tossing her hair. Still talking in riddles, David? Some things never change. David's lips curved into the faintest smile. Some things do. He handed the microphone back, bowed slightly to the audience, and returned to his seat. But the weight of his words lingered like smoke in the air. Melissa laughed again, But this time it sounded just a little too loud. The night grew heavier with anticipation. Guests whispered in small clusters, glancing from Melissa's dazzling smile to the quiet, composed figure seated at the back. David had said little, but the weight of his words still hung in the air. When the band paused and the clinking of glasses rose, the best man called out, "A toast. The bride and groom deserve a final word before we dance the night away." Melissa's eyes gleamed. This was her moment to end the evening with triumph. She pulled Raymond to the stage, microphone in hand. "Thank you all," she declared, her voice carrying across the ballroom. "You've seen tonight the life we've built, the life we deserve, and nothing can shake what we found." Applause thundered, but when Melissa turned, her gaze locked on David. "David," she said, her tone lilting with mockery, "why don't you come up one more time? Surely you'd like to wish us well." The crowd murmured, half in curiosity, half in discomfort. David rose, straightened his jacket, and walked forward. His calm presence seemed to part the room. When he reached the stage, Melissa handed him the microphone with a smirk, whispering, "Don't embarrass yourself." David held the microphone loosely, his eyes sweeping the crowd before returning to Melissa. His voice was measured, smooth, but each word struck like a hammer. "I'll keep this brief. Tonight is indeed a celebration of choices. Choices that define us, that shape our futures. Some choose appearances, some choose shortcuts, some choose people for what they have rather than who they are." He glanced at Melissa. Then Raymond, his expression unreadable. Whispers stirred. Melissa stiffened. "But choices," David continued, "have consequences." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim folder. With deliberate calm, he laid it on the podium, flipping it open. The screen behind them flickered to life. A presentation appeared, bearing a logo instantly recognizable to many in the room. Cole Innovations. Gasps rippled. Guests leaned forward, recognizing the name from headlines. "This hotel," David said evenly, "where we gather tonight, belongs to Sterling Enterprises. As of last quarter, I became majority shareholder in Sterling Enterprises." The ballroom froze. Even the chandeliers seemed to hang heavier in the silence. Melissa's smirk faltered, her lipstick smile trembling. That's not possible," she whispered. Raymond's glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. David's eyes swept the room, calm as ever. "And Raymond," he said, turning slightly, "your company has been using my patents for months. Every cent you've made relies on my designs. I own the rights. You owe me, not the other way around." The crowd erupted in gasps and murmurs. Phones lit up as guests searched the claims, finding articles, contracts, proof. Melissa's face drained of color. Her laughter was gone. Her triumph was ashes. David set the microphone down, his words hanging heavy in the stunned silence. "So thank you, Melissa, for inviting me tonight. If not for you, none of this would exist. You left me because I had nothing. And now," he paused, the silence sharp as glass, "you see what nothing became." The ballroom was no longer a place of celebration. What had been laughter and champagne just moments ago had transformed into silence so thick it seemed to choke the air. Guests stared at Melissa and Raymond, their perfect facade unraveling under the weight of David's words. Melissa's face was pale, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the podium. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The room that had once been her stage now felt like a tribunal, every guest an unflinching witness to her humiliation. Raymond tried to recover, forcing a smile that never reached his eyes. "This is nonsense," he barked. "He's bluffing. David's just trying to ruin our day." But then, as if on cue, several guests held up their phones. Screens glowed with headlines. "Cole Innovations acquires Sterling Enterprises. Raymond Blake sued over patent infringement. David Cole, from nothing to empire." The truth was undeniable. Raymond's shoulders sagged, his mask shattered. He backed away from the podium, avoiding Melissa's frantic glare. For the first time, he looked small, just another man out of his depth, drowning in debts he could no longer hide. Melissa's voice finally broke through, shrill and desperate. "David, please," she called after him as he turned toward the doors. The entire room held its breath. David stopped, but he didn't look back immediately. When he did, his expression was calm, almost sorrowful. "Melissa," he said softly, his words carrying across the hushed ballroom, "you left me because I was poor. You mocked me because I had nothing. But poverty isn't permanent. Cruelty is." Her eyes filled with tears, but he didn't falter. "I came tonight because you wanted me to see your triumph. Instead, you've seen mine. And now you know the truth. You didn't trade up. You traded away." A murmur spread through the guests, a wave of realization and pity that seemed to press Melissa deeper into her shame. Her jeweled gown, her perfect hair, her carefully painted smile, all of it meant nothing now. David handed the microphone to a stunned usher, straightened his jacket, and walked toward the doors. Every step was deliberate, measured, the quiet confidence of a man who no longer needed revenge because justice had revealed itself. As he reached the exit, he paused one last time. Without turning fully, he spoke into the silence. "One day, Melissa, you'll understand. Love built on greed is the weakest foundation of all." And with that, he walked out. The heavy doors closed behind him with a resounding thud, sealing the moment forever. Inside, chaos erupted. Some guests rose and left in shame. Others whispered furiously, their eyes darting toward Melissa and Raymond, now exposed as frauds. Raymond stormed away, his phone buzzing relentlessly with creditors' calls. Melissa remained frozen at the podium, tears streaking her carefully painted face, her bouquet slipping from her trembling hands. She had wanted David to witness her victory. Instead, she had orchestrated her own ruin. Outside, David stepped into the cool night air. The city lights stretched before him, bright and endless. He inhaled deeply, the weight of years lifting off his shoulders. For the first time, he didn't feel the sting of Melissa's laughter or the weight of her rejection. He felt only freedom. And as the wind carried the faint echo of music from the ballroom, David Cole walked into the night, not as the man she left, but as the man she could never reach again.